Hello everyone, and welcome back to another monthly episode of Mycotoxin Matters. We're delighted today to be going back to, I guess, one of the core topics that we do focus a lot on here. We're looking at research and much of Alltech's bank of research across our different products and species. And more specifically, today we're going to be looking at some of the meta-analysis work that our teams have been undertaking across the last 2 months and years, and even looking ahead to the future within some of that work too. On today's episode, we're delighted to be joined by Dr. Alexandra Weaver. Dr. Weaver, many of our listeners will be well familiar with her from various episodes that we have recorded over the past while. But we're also delighted to be joined for the first time by Dr. Jules Taylor-Pickard. Jules is based in the UK. And Jules, it would be great if you could give us a brief introduction to your, I guess, lengthy career now at Alltech and some of the work that you and your teams are focused on.
Thanks, Martin. So yes, delighted to be here today. I'm Jules Taylor-Pickard. I've worked with Alltech for 21 years now in various functions. I originally did my PhD in piglet gut health, immunology and physiology. So I joined on the technical pig side. I then moved into managing our technical team for Europe, and then held a number of global roles since that, then in terms of global mycotoxin management, the gut health platform, and more recently on the technology group. And that's really enabled me to be involved in research with Alltech, supporting our customers, supporting our research team to make sure that we can really elucidate the mode of action of our products, but also demonstrate the efficacy and profitability for our customers. So it's a really nice balance between the scientific research side of things and the commercial side of things within Alltech.
That is great. Thank you, Jules, and certainly something I think we'll be coming back to talk about with you as we get into the podcast later on. Alexandra, again, you've talked to our listeners quite a lot or shared a lot of information on mycotoxins over the past few years. We're just going to start there again, if that's okay, and we're going to come at it a little differently. Your PhD was in the field of mycotoxins, but I guess when you were undertaking that and starting out on your research journey, the amount of information in related to mycotoxins and then animal applications as well was probably pretty limited. Would you like maybe to share a little bit of, I guess, the journey you've been on in terms of that research exploration over the last while, but then also talking about, what is the significance of, I guess, the now much larger bank of research the industry has been able to put together in terms of mycotoxins and understanding trends and emerging issues and so on?
Yep, that's a great place to start and great question. So yeah, when I was doing my master's and PhD work, 10, 15 years ago, I would say that looking at mycotoxin research, it was really focused on some of the key mycotoxins like aflatoxin or deoxynivalenol. And most of the time that was looking at fairly high levels of mycotoxins being fed to the animals. So what I started to do with my research was actually looking at some lower, more reasonably consumed levels of mycotoxins, so things that might be out there in a normal diet being fed to the animals, and we were trying to see how those lower levels were impacting those animals. So I would say that once we started kind of entering into that area of the naturally contaminated lower levels, I did start to notice in maybe the next 5 or so years that was where a lot more research was going, looking at those naturally contaminated lower levels. And I'd say in the past few years, really, it's advanced even more that now, rather than just looking at the key, parent mycotoxins like aflatoxin, DON, zearalenone, we're now starting to see a lot of research with other mycotoxins like the emerging mycotoxins. That's one area that really the research has increased, and that's very important because we see that those mycotoxins are actually very frequently detected in any commodity or feed that we have tested here at Alltech. So to have research that shows, what are those other mycotoxin groups doing is very important for understanding the total risk to the animal and observing and understanding and controlling the symptoms.
Great. I think building on that then, Alexandra, and if we think more specifically of, I guess, Alltech's research in the field of mycotoxins, If I remember correctly, we're probably heading for almost 200 peer-reviewed studies, both probably understanding the impact of mycotoxins in animals, but then on the flip side, looking at the efficacy of technologies to mitigate that mycotoxin challenge. Much of that has probably been generated, it's fair to say, they're individual type studies. You know, as we get to whatever it is, almost 200 peer-reviewed studies, putting together a more comprehensive understanding of the collective findings of that is something, I guess, as a team and teams Alltech have been undertaking over the past few years. Would you like to maybe reflect on the importance of that?
Yes. So all of that individual research is great. Each trial provides some piece of information that you can learn about mycotoxins and managing mycotoxins. But it's maybe hard to make an overall conclusion of that, the effects of toxins or the benefits of mitigating that when you're looking at all these different pieces of information. So what you can do is actually generate what we call a meta-analysis. That's a statistical method that allows you actually to bring all of the different research within a category. So within a species or the performance aspect that you might want to look at, you can bring that together and then get one overall conclusion. So you can quantify that overall conclusion and get a better piece of information or one single piece of information out of all those many research trials. And so it really helps when you look at the research this way to just apply that to, what could you see on the farm and how could the management solution be helpful in that case.
Jules, I think it'd be good to bring you in at this point. I think you've been probably heavily involved and actively involved in many of the meta-analyses that our Alltech teams have been producing over the past few years, and it's certainly a term that has become much more familiar within our company, but then probably also the wider livestock industry as well. Building on Alexandra's reflection on the meta-analysis from a mycotoxin perspective, would you like to talk a bit more about, even what is the meta-analysis, and again, from your perspective, why are they so beneficial to help, I guess, provide a clear understanding of those individual studies when they all come together?
Certainly, Martin. So meta-analysis, as Alexandra said, allows you to take a large number of independent research studies and analyze them collectively. So it also means that it gives you an awful lot of statistical power and allows you to pull out different types of relationships and trends and things to help you to have a much deeper understanding. And looking at it at a simple level, it's easier for the reader because you can just read one meta-analysis paper than having to read 200 different papers. So there's also a convenience factor for the reader. But from our perspective, it allows us to bring our research together collectively, also allows us to make the most of all the wealth and the body of data that we have. So I think it makes it easier for the readers to interpret, and you can bring different individual research studies or publications together that have maybe addressed different areas, which is what Alexandra said, because then you can start to look at different relationships and different aspects rather than trying to look at individual studies separately. And I think that really helps the industry, helps ultimately the producer that would be using, in this case, where we're talking about mycotoxins, that has issues with mycotoxins in the field.
Jules, I really like how you frame it around making it easy. And I guess when we think of the value of research from a practical application and thinking on farm, making it easy is probably most crucial right there. From that perspective, if we think of translating a lot of this research into language that is practical and understandable at a livestock producer level, how does the meta-analysis help that, and what's the onus on the industry and a company like Alltech to ensure that all of this research that we are producing is applicable and understandable at a farm level?
Yeah, and I think that's really important in terms of how easy it is for people to interpret, because the whole arena of mycotoxins in this instance is complicated. It's not straightforward, and a lot of people, as soon as they start to think about mycotoxins, because there's such a broad range of mycotoxins and different symptoms that you can see on farm, it can make it very difficult for people in the industry to be able to recognise what issues they're seeing, and then to understand what sort of strategies they can go in with, whether it's a mitigant, but also looking at the management strategies that they need to apply to be able to deal with the source of the mycotoxins in the first place. So it really helps people to understand what effects they can be seeing in their animals and the magnitude of those effects, and like I said, the different effects that you can see. And I think that's particularly important. And here within Alltech, we also tried to apply a logical interpretation of that data to make it practical. And that fits in with our REQ equivalent when we're looking at how we can mitigate the effect of mycotoxins and try to quantify the effect of mycotoxins, particularly when we have multiple mycotoxins present. Alexandra talked at the beginning about her PhD and how back then a lot of the work was looking at really high levels of mycotoxins and not necessarily what we'd be seeing commercially out there. Whereas a lot of our research now has moved on to those lower levels. But what we've been able to demonstrate, particularly through our 37 plus mycotoxin analysis, is that there's a lot of different mycotoxins that occur at a much lower level, but within a particular feed material or a raw material. And when you have those mycotoxins, which in isolation may not have caused that big an effect, but when you put them together, then you can start to have some really quite detrimental effects in our animals. So I think it helps our customers and people in the industry to really understand that, so that we can work on the best intervention strategy possible for our producers, but more importantly for the health and well-being of our animals.
Thank you, Jules. And I guess even going back to that interpretation piece, as a marketeer, you know, it's always great when we see this new research coming out, and there's an onus on us to be able to work with our research teams and commercial teams as well to almost, you know, deliver that in a manner that is easily communicable and understandable, again, at different points in that animal supply chain. So something that we always enjoy working with when we see this new type of research coming out. How do we really distill that and ensure that it is getting out to the right audience in a manner that can be implemented and used? Alexandra, going back to you, and certainly across the last few years, you and the mycotoxin research team, I guess specifically, have been very busy. I think you're now on your third meta-analysis, having worked through, I think, broilers initially, then you went into pigs, and now you're back at the recent publication of a layer meta-analysis. Would you like and even to take a minute or two to reflect on some of the findings and insights from that layer meta-analysis that was published a few weeks back?
Yep, that would be great. So I guess with all of the meta-analysis that we have published, our goal is kind of two sides. One, we want to see the mycotoxin effect on the animal, but then we also want to see the use of what we call in the research yeast cell wall extract, or the Alltech Mycosorb product, and how that can benefit the animal's performance during a mycotoxin challenge. So with this recently published layer meta-analysis, we were able to look at the research that we had available looking at layer performance. So specifically, we were focusing on things like egg production and egg weight. And we were able to collect that research together to get, again, in that meta-analysis, that overall result from each of these different individual trials. And what we were able to see is actually that the mycotoxins did have an impact on those laying hens. We saw that there was a change in egg production of a loss of 6.3 percentage points in production. And egg weight also went down, on average 1.95 grams per egg. So the mycotoxins here, the feeding of the mycotoxins, did have a negative impact on the performance of those hens. And then when we utilized our product, our management solution, Mycosorb, we actually saw that there was a significant increase in the egg production. So it went up 4.2 percentage points. And the egg weight also increased by, on average, 1.37 grams per egg. And then to make this research, I guess, even more valuable, we wanted to actually take those averages from the research, the meta-analysis, those averages on egg production and egg weight, and apply them to the calculations for things like profitability, for ROI, and what would be happening in these birds really on the farm. And so what we did was we actually ran those calculations, and we were able to see that Over the average length of the trials included, which was 9.5 weeks, we could see that per hen, we saw about 2.7 grams eggs more, per hen. That would increase the total edible protein output for each of those hens by almost 30 grams. We also saw that the feed per egg was reduced by about 6 or 7 grams. And overall, we had a very positive return on investment of about 4.7 to 1. So taking that information from the meta-analysis, from that research, we can then, bring all those trials together, get that overall impact, and actually apply that to production on the farm, so we could get an estimate again of how this is influencing the producer at the farm, influencing performance, influencing profitability.
Alexandra, as you think then about building from broiler into the swine, into the layer, is there one or two common themes that maybe you would see coming through in those individual meta-analyses that maybe tie together, or is there anything within that?
Yep. So for each of the three meta-analyses we have, broilers, growing pigs, and now layers, we've been able to see that mycotoxins do have a negative impact on the performance of the animals, and the use of the management solution, Mycosorb, has been able to help manage those mycotoxin symptoms. Interestingly, what we see in a little bit different on the pig side, we had quite a large body of research, and we were able to divide that into categories, either looking at very low mycotoxin levels below the EU and US regulatory guidelines, and then in another category looking above those guideline limits. And we could see that actually even below those guideline limits, there was still a significant effect on the performance of the pigs. So they had significant reductions, in particularly in average daily gain. Whereas then we could also improve that and significantly improve the gain with the use of our management solution. On the broiler side, we did a little bit different, where we were actually able to not only look at the changes in performance of mycotoxins and management solutions, but also looking at how carbon footprint could be influenced with mycotoxins. And it was very interesting that we did see that mycotoxins could potentially increase the carbon footprint of production, while using Mycosorb could actually help lower that carbon footprint of production, because these birds were much more efficient and there was a less mortality rate, a lower mortality rate of these birds. So overall, we had an improvement in efficiency.
Jules, that's a really interesting call out, I guess, that Alexandra makes in terms of applying those sustainability or carbon footprint parameters to meta-analysis. We've talked a lot about the mycotoxin research over the past few minutes here, but the other teams across Alltech, be it in gut health or the mineral team and so on, have been busy as well over the past few years. Would you like maybe to give a brief overview of some of the work that has been undertaken across some of the other portfolio of products within Alltech stable, and then maybe reflect again on that sustainability piece? We have products like Optogen, which the sustainability part would have been a big piece of that research.
Certainly, Martin. So yeah, we've been working through our various technologies, reviewing the data and preparing them into meta-analyses. We've recently just published one on the organic bioplex minerals in layers, where we've shown a significant improvement in eggshell strength, significant improvement in productivity. So in terms of hen day production, less second-class eggs, for example. And it really does correlate to what we're seeing commercially with our customers in the field. So I like that piece, because then that feels like we've got, or it demonstrates that we've got that scientific substantiation of what we're seeing commercially. And it does help with those conversations when we're going out and talking to customers, but also talking to researchers as well. The gut health team have also been very busy looking at meta-analyses for Actogen, where we're able to demonstrate that improvement in gut health really does improve the performance, reduces the mortality, and ultimately demonstrates that you can get a higher amount of protein output per sow per year, which people can then use with their sustainability targets. And we've got a lot of customers that use the meta-analyses, where we've been able to look at that sustainability piece and get that into the publication to start their journey and to help them achieve what a lot of them are going for at the minute, which is net zero. And we see some really significant reductions in CO2 equivalents through the use of the Alltech technologies. And it's because we've got that large body of data that we can pull together into a meta-analysis that allows us to create that sustainability piece. And it makes the data much more robust and almost much more believable, because you've got that large body of data. It's not just one individual trial. You've been able to do it from a large collection of studies across different regions and across different parameters that have been measured. So it really is a very powerful piece that we're able to use, and our customers are finding it very, very useful to help them with some of their decisions that they're making.
Jules, it's fair to say science and research has been at the core of Alltech since its founding over 40 years ago. As we now transition, I guess, into a newer age within livestock production, how do you think some of the demands from, be it regulatory and consumers and legislation and so on, is going to think about how we do research in the future? Like, much of it before was probably driven about increasing performance and productivity and so on. Do you think there will be a shift in terms of how we will be assessing products and researching them in the future based on some of the general shifts in the industry, and how is Alltech set up to respond to that?
Absolutely. And I think if you look back to Alltech, when we first built the nutrigenomics facility, Alltech was the first, the only commercial organisation to have its own nutrigenomics facility, but we were one of the first organisations, if you will, to get into that arena. And that really allowed us to advance our science, because before, where you'd have to have lots of animals and it would take a long time to do the experiments, because we were able to use those gene chips, it really accelerated what we were able to learn. And I always remember one from the early 2000s, we see an increase in milk yield with Celplex. And the question was, well, why would you see an increase in milk yield from an organic selenium source? But through nutrigenomics, we were able to elucidate that we were changing the energy pathways in that cow. So it really, techniques like that, of which Alltech's at the forefront, really do help to advance our knowledge. And I think we're seeing that now. We've worked extensively in gut health, and we're looking at different markers that we can use so that we don't need to sacrifice animals, or we don't need to take different measurements that we can. And we're looking a lot more at welfare type parameters and things that we can measure that can help to educate the end consumer at the end of the day, because ultimately they've got a voice. And I think it's fair to say that they don't necessarily understand what we're doing in agriculture. And I think it's our opportunity to be proactive and use our research, use our science to be able to educate both the industry, but also the end consumer. So I think we're heading in the right direction. Alltech has been built on science, primacy in science. We always excel in research, and it's something that we always like to look at, and whether there's different techniques that we can use that are much more efficient to advance our knowledge at a much faster rate. I think we'll see a lot more of that coming along in the future.
Fantastic note to finish on. Thank you, Jules, and thank you, Alexandra. Thank you both for joining us today. I think, if I remember correctly, it's 8 meta-analyses we now have published within Alltech. I know, Jules, there's many more in the works as well. So as some of those come to publication over the next while, I've no doubt we'll probably have you back on Mycotoxin Matters to talk through some of those findings. Thank you once again to the listeners for joining us. I know we'll be sharing some of the links to those various studies in the show notes. And if you do need any more information, do reach out across any of our online channels or contact some of your local Alltech team. We'll be more than happy to talk a bit in more detail around some of what was shared today. And hopefully we'll see you back here next month for another episode of Mycotoxin Matters. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed listening today and look forward to you joining us next time on the Mycotoxin Matters podcast. For more information on the topics discussed, please visit knowmycotoxins.com. That's KNOW mycotoxins.com.